All right, welcome to The Rundown, everyone. I'm Sunny Galt. I'm a messenger with United Network News, and we are the news division of United Network. And our mission is to bring you the real news. And we do that in various ways. We have in-depth news coverage that comes out. We've got local stories told through the eyes of our field messengers, which I'll tell you a little bit more about in just a bit. We talk about the restoration of our planet and how we're creating this beautiful new Earth. And we also have updates from our partners at the Global Intelligence Agency of what's really happening on this planet, even outside of this planet. Because this is the ultimate battle of good versus evil. You are here at the most incredible time, I think, to be on this planet. So if some of you are new to our content, maybe you haven't watched our news before, we're going to talk about things that nobody else talks about. And that's because we have access through the GIA to the highest security clearance on our planet, not just for the U.S., where a lot of us are based, not everyone. We have people that work at UNN from all over the world. But some of our core group live in the United States. But it's not about country. If you listen to mainstream media or alternative media, they're going to say, oh, this country against this country. But the more you start digging, the more you start learning, you realize that really this is a situation of people who think that they're special. They call themselves elites. They'll call themselves, bloodlines of, Solomon or, some Lucifer creature or whatever. Think of the worst thing you can think of. Cain is another big one they throw around. So they think they're special. And then they think the rest of humanity is on the other side and that we're nothing. We're cattle, And that's not true. And it's very obvious that's not true because the powers that were are going down. And that's why this world seems so crazy right now. It's actually not a bad thing. It's a very good thing. But sometimes when you're in this transition, it's very uncomfortable. And there's so much stuff that's happening on a spiritual level as well that most of us don't really recognize. We know that we feel a little weird sometimes. We're not really sure why. Sometimes we just need to take a little break. This week for me was one of those times where I just had to go off and be in my own zone for a couple days, really. I was just... I need to spend time with Source. I just need to get away from everything. I need to reconnect. I was feeling, kind of out of it. There was actually a good reason for that, which we'll explain in the GIA report in just a little bit. There's a lot of stuff going on. So we try to shine light on that for you in our news updates and checking in with Kim with the GIA report. And that's so you know what's going on. So you can make decisions for yourself and your family. And what we do on this podcast is it's basically a week in review. So we're going to go over some of the top stories that we discussed over the last week, because sometimes it's easy to miss stuff and some of these reports can be kind of long. So I know you guys are busy, so we thought this would be a good way to update you on what's going on. Also, if you want to share UNN with somebody else, maybe they're not members, because in order to get our content right when it comes out, you do need to be a member. You can look that up and get more information about that at unitednetwork.earth. We do release all of our content a week later after it's released just to our members. So if you don't want to become a member, that's okay. I can't promise the content's going to stay on YouTube or Rumble, because you know how that goes, but we do release it. With anything that we talk about, I always encourage you guys to think critically and to always ask questions. Do additional research. Don't just believe something because we say it on the news. I hope that the stories and the information we present are a catalyst for you guys to do your own digging, at least about the topics that are important to you. And then I hope you share that information with other people. You can't wake anybody up. I know most people listening to this podcast would consider themselves awake and aware, and that's great. But you can't wake somebody else up. You can't shake them and be like, why are you so consumed with this presidential election in the U.S.? Don't you know they select the candidates for you? You have no say in this. If you tried to do that with most people, they would look at you like you had four heads. So you can't wake people up, but you can be there. You can be their soft landing, right? So more and more people are starting to realize, because the matrix is going away on this planet. We talk about that a lot. This whole matrix that we've been in, it's this kind of false world. Our planet's not actually even called Earth, you guys. It's called Gaia. Earth is the matrix part of our planet. We have so much stuff to learn. So be that soft spot for people to land. So when they start asking questions, it's not an I told you so, because trust me, I've got the I told you so's in my life too. It's not that. It's just to be there to help them in this whole process. So I hope that you guys do that. Take the information and share it with other people. Let's see. Any announcements for today? Happy November, everyone. How did that happen? I guess the one announcement I have is that for the United Marketplace, this is something that we've been working on. You can get more information on it at unitednetwork.earth. But this is a marketplace that we believe at some point will replace sites like Amazon, which are very much just focused on profits over people. And we know you guys, the people that listen to this podcast, people that listen to our news updates, you all have incredible products that you sell on your own. So why are we giving all of our money away to these large corporations? Why aren't we helping the people that really care about the products they're putting out there, where it's not just a race to the bottom because, you got to sell your product, you got to reduce your price. Like, that's just not going to work. We want to support you guys. So we have created this marketplace, and we've said all along, we're going to launch this thing in November. It is now, as of this recording, November 2nd. So we're going to have more information in the next week or so about what's going on with that exactly. We're making huge strides, a lot of progress. We've hired this outside company that's been helping us with this, but we're doing something completely new and different, and we're trying to do this worldwide. So more information is coming on that in just a little bit. Not in this podcast, but next week. All right, let's get to all of our stories. Here's the rundown of stories you may have missed this week on UNN. So I mentioned that our local stories come from our field messengers, and I just want to take a moment to tell you guys more about being a field messenger and what that's like. These are everyday people. They happen to have a smartphone, and they go out and they record what's happening in their community. And there's no real requirements to be a field messenger. It's not like you come on board and we're like, okay, you need to have at least one report a month. That's not how we work. Because news is happening all around you. We can't predict where real news, not the fake stuff that they give you on mainstream media, but we can't predict where real news is going to happen. So when that does happen in your area, take out your phone, which most of us have, show us what's going on, tell us with a quick voiceover or whatever. You don't even have to be on camera. But this is how we think news is going to be done moving forward. We envision a UNN where it's primarily all field messenger reports. So we've been doing this for a couple years now, and we have people that are sending in their stories from all over the world. Of course, we envision field messengers in every single country, and lots of field messengers in every single country. So if you want more information about this, about what's involved, we started weekly meetings. I think it's every Friday now, where our production team is there and they can answer any questions that you have. So go on our website, learn more. We've got a Telegram group where, we go over all this kind of stuff and you guys can ask questions. But get involved, okay? Because this is your news. And can you imagine how fantastic a news update would be if it's just field messenger reports from people all over the world? I think that's so cool. It's like the unfiltered version of news, and it all starts with you guys. So let's go over our field messenger reports for this last week. We have been doing 3 reports in each news update, so each video that we put out. Let's start with Emma in Spain, and she teaches us how to make passion fruit jam. Passion fruit, obviously, it is a fruit. If you've ever had it, it's quite good, very nutritious for you, very tropical, and it is a cherished fruit from around the world. And I believe Emma said a friend of hers gave her like this whole bucket full of passion fruit. And so she wanted to make jam. That's something that she really enjoys. And she shows us the whole process. So, everything from cutting the fruit open and then going over to the stove, making the jam, and then what it looks like in the jars afterward. Apparently, It is very well known for its high iron content. So if anyone struggles with that, you don't want to take a supplement, maybe incorporating natural passion fruit or perhaps this jam would work well in your diet. All right, out of eastern Uganda, Mwanda Michael shows us how, I believe it's pronounced cassava. Cassava serves as a staple food for many families in eastern Uganda. And Mwanda Michael takes us to a field and he shows us how this is cultivated and how it's prepared and how it kind of reminds me, because they do peel it. I don't know if you have to peel it, but he starts out in the field and then he shows you kind of like the various stages it can go through. But this is an important staple for the people of eastern Uganda. It's kind of nice to see. I know we're kind of on this food kick right now, passion fruit and now cassava. But, it's nice to see what people are eating in other countries. Maybe it's something you can incorporate into your own diet. Gisela from Belgium talks about a grassroots farm. And this is a really cool farm, you guys. Any farm that has, I don't know what it is. It's like how they have the nice straight rows, like some of the stuff was in greenhouses. It looks so organized and pretty. And it's not just about looking pretty, obviously, but a well-manicured farm looks really, really cool. It actually brings like this sense of peace on me. I don't know if you guys experience that too, but when things look really nice and then the vegetables look amazing, it's like, oh my gosh, it's like the Garden of Eden, right? That's what this reminds me of. So Gisela shows us this farm. This is a regenerative farm. They practice organic farming. And one of the things I liked, because she interviewed one of the farmers here, and one of the things that the farmer said that I thought was incredible is that this food isn't just for the people. She talked about it being for birds, insects, and other animals. And, when we're farming, when we're gardening, we usually think of anything interfering with our food as being a nuisance. But who are we to say that animals can't partake of this as well? I know we get frustrated and, the deer ate, this, or rabbits are eating my vegetables. But, it's really all about sharing. And I really liked their messaging with that. So anyways, check that video out about the grassroots farm there. Ruth out of California shows us Canadian geese who apparently were on the verge of extinction due to excessive hunting and the loss of their natural habitats. But the good news is they are making an impressive comeback, according to Ruth. They are protected in a lot of different areas. There are preservation efforts in order to, keep these geese thriving. And especially in the United States, because I think the United States was part of their migratory path, but we've got more of these geese that are now just hanging out in the U.S., which is kind of cool. She says they number in the millions now, and it really is a worldwide success story for species preservation. Very cool. Michelle out of Canada does a story about the Marchador horse. This is something that you guys should look up online. A very, very beautiful horse. And I don't know a lot about horses, but these horses are, a little bit differently. They are relatively unknown in Canada, but she was talking about its coloring and just a very beautiful creature. So if you are a horse enthusiast or, just want to check out a beautiful animal, be sure to check out that story. Tony out of Italy is talking about flamingos. So I guess we went from food to talking about animals. I love flamingos. They are fascinating. So these birds, as many of you know, are known for their striking pink feathers. And then they've got these really long, thin legs. So Tony found them out in the wild in an area of Italy. And that's kind of cool, right? Anytime I've seen flamingos, they've been in a zoo or maybe at some casino in Las Vegas, something like that. These flamingos that she showed us, their body actually, with their feathers and stuff, actually looked more white. Because I don't know if you guys know this, the pink actually comes from the shrimp that these flamingos eat. So if they're not eating a lot of that shrimp, obviously their feathers aren't going to be as pink. And this was another interesting fact that she said. So you know how they're usually like standing on one leg or the other leg, and you're like, they have amazing balance. I think they can even sleep that way. She says they alternate legs so their legs don't freeze together. Because apparently a lot of the waters that they're typically in, it's pretty darn cold. So that's one reason that they change up their legs. I thought that was interesting. Monica out of Romania shows us a steam train that's historic in her area and the Weser Valley of northern Romania. She says it dates back nearly a century, and it was originally made or used, I guess I should say, for the forestry industry. But now they're not really using it for that, so it is a tourist attraction. And she shows us how they create the steam. The more steam you have, by the way, the faster a train will go. So, yeah, just a little bit about this steam train. She says it's a beautiful way to enjoy nature, and they do some really cool stuff for Christmas. Probably like a Polar Express kind of thing, right? Very cool at Christmas time. John out of South Africa shows us an aerospace exhibition. This is interesting. It is the Africa Aerospace and Defense Exhibition. And it is a way for various countries and companies to showcase their military capabilities. So all of their fun toys are on display here. And he said, I believe for this event, maybe it was like a handful of days, but it was very cloudy. He said normally there would be planes flying in the sky, doing some cool shows and things like that. But unfortunately, that would have been too dangerous. It was just way too cloudy. So I don't think they had the turnout that they expected, but it was still kind of cool to see, different military capabilities from different countries and, what that looks like. Of course, probably don't have all the top secret stuff on display for people, but how else are you going to be able to see this if you don't live near a base? Like I live in San Diego, so I'm pretty close to Camp Pendleton. I go on base quite a bit and I see this kind of stuff, but most people don't. So it's kind of cool to catch a glimpse of it. Kim out of Detroit takes us to the Detroit Auto Show. And she said the reason she wanted to go to this is because there was an air car that she wanted to check out. And she shows video of this. It kind of looks like a helicopter. A helicopter car is the best way that I can describe it. But it's kind of cool to go to some of these shows. Every time I go to these shows, which is not that often, but I'm like, okay, what's the technology like really? Because kind of like the aerospace exhibition, it's like, yeah, that's what you're showing us. And how many times have we heard that we're going to be flying in cars? And it hasn't happened yet. I mean, I watched, Back to the Future however many years ago. We should be flying in cars right now. Don't get me started. Obviously we know a lot of technology has been suppressed. I think that's coming soon. We're going to have access to technologies that are going to blow our minds because all that stuff was saved for non-humans and elites and all that kind of stuff. And now it's going to be available for all of humanity. And I think we're going to make huge strides in new discoveries. And, when you get engineers together and you don't have this whole patent system and stuff that holds people back and copyright and all this crap that was really just to, give everything to the elites and, leave us with nothing. Well, then that's when true innovation happens. And I think that's really exciting. And here are some of the news stories that we worked on this week. Have you guys noticed that our news stories, at least most of them, have kind of turned into investigative reports? It's like, this is going down. Let us tell you the real story behind whatever the story is about. We've got several of those this week. Let's kick things off with talking about acne medication. Okay, and how it has been recently linked to potential cancer risks. So there is a toxic chemical called benzene. It is a known carcinogen, and it's recently become this major concern in skincare, particularly in sunscreens and acne treatments. So when we went into doing this story, just a little bit of background here, I thought, okay, yes, let's expose all this nasty chemicals. And we know that there's a lot of stuff in these products that should not be in there. So I get excited when something gets exposed. However, this story kind of took a turn because the more we did research, the more we realized that really the study was done by a company called Valisure. They consider themselves an independent lab, but they have led many investigations really targeting this benzene. And benzene isn't always an ingredient that's listed on the side. Sometimes it happens naturally when chemicals get together. It kind of forms. Sometimes it's a result of contamination. And it's really only this one company that's saying all this stuff. And when you really go more deep, you realize that they have connections. Let's just say they're doing some shady stuff. I recommend you guys actually listen to the report. We have some really interesting information about other contracts that they may have. I didn't mention it in this report. They're also tied to the Pentagon. And there's a lot of shady stuff. Let's just put it that way. I'm not saying that these products don't have nasty stuff in them. I'm sure they do. If nothing else, there's things that disrupt your hormones and other, things that just aren't compatible with human bodies. But sometimes you have to go digging, right? This is an example of us, thinking a story was going to turn out one way. And we're like, oh, wait a sec. There's another story behind the story. And that's why you can't just look at these headlines and just be like, oh, cancer everywhere. Yeah, part of that's fear. Part of that's true. It may not just come from one ingredient, but there's so many different ways that there's so many different products out there that have nasty stuff. When you combine it together is really where the toxicity comes from. It's not just, it's just in this one product or whatever. But when you're getting it from all angles, when we're getting it from the sky and our food and the water that we drink and everything, that's when it becomes a problem. Here is a soundbite talking about benzene and how it's really all around us in various forms.
I've talked about how this report on benzene and acne products use really high heat, but how scared should we be at normal temperatures? The Valisure report doesn't specifically tell us the numbers, but if we look at these graphs, we can estimate them from day 0. Assuming they measured these correctly, it looks like most of them are quite low, but a few might have about 20 parts per million. This is 10 times more than a limit the FDA has used before, which isn't great, but it's less scary than some people are making it sound. Benzene is actually all around us because it's in fossil fuels. It's at 1,000 parts per million in petrol and it evaporates into the air. It's also in natural gas and paints and furniture. Yes, it is a known carcinogen and there's no safe level, but that doesn't mean that any amount is dangerous. It means that little bits will add up to increase your risk of cancer. And even though we all breathe in benzene all the time, the vast majority of us don't end up with benzene-related cancers.
So again, this is just something we need to keep in mind. When we see stories like this, yeah, we know there's bad stuff in these products, but is it really attributed to what they're telling us it's attributed to? Because there's benzene everywhere. Is it just coming from this? Should it be in those products? No, probably not. Okay. But there's often shadiness behind this. We found out that the guy that runs, I think he's the president of Valisure, he also has a patent on a product that does the exact same thing, another acne product. So it's like he's trying to take down these companies. What? So his product can, get more support? So again, don't just look at the headlines. We also ran a story about transparent solar cells, okay? This is a huge breakthrough in solar technology. And it has the potential to turn everyday surfaces like windows and screens into energy sources because it's transparent. And that obviously expands solar energy options beyond just having those panels on rooftops. Unlike these traditional opaque panels, these cells allow visible light through while capturing non-visible wavelengths, making them ideal for like large buildings, any kind of glass facade, even like with your cell phone and things like that. This could be used. It's a little bit less efficient than standard panels, but they do provide some unique advantages, and people are talking about this, so we wanted to look into this a little bit more. They do come with some challenges, though. It costs more to produce it. Like I said, there's lower efficiency. There are also environmental concerns, the same things that we have with other solar panels. And that's that. How are you going to dispose of this without all the chemicals leaking into our groundwater? You know, we have a lot of questions about solar energy in general. Is that really the most efficient way to do this? But I could also see huge skyscrapers and large buildings being able, you know, maybe not all the energy comes from these panels, but if we could figure out a way to dispose of it and to be smart about it with regards to our planet, this could just be one more way for us to get free energy. We also did a story about the UK government and how they are introducing a new, they're calling it comprehensive, I'm sure that's strategic, employment rights bill. Now, this is aimed at making workplaces fair by ending exploitative practices and expanding employee protections. One of the big changes is about granting unfair dismissal protections from day one. So the moment people start working at a job, they would be protected against unfair dismissal. Here's a soundbite talking about why that's so important, especially in the UK.
But the really, really interesting thing that affects absolutely everyone is changing unfair dismissal from a 2-year qualifying period to a day one right. Now, this is absolutely enormous because unfair dismissal is a very precise and strict test that employers have to follow. It basically says that you can't dismiss someone unless you pass 2 tests. The first one is that you're dismissing them for one of 5 fair reasons, and the second one is that you followed a fair process. If an employer doesn't pass either of those tests, then the dismissal becomes unfair, and the employee has the ability to take their employer to tribunal and seek compensation.
Okay, so there's more things besides that. They are talking about ending 0-hour contracts, so people have more stable hours. So it's not like, oh, you get all these hours this week, you get nothing next week. They're trying to make that more stable for employees. They are also tackling fire and rehire tactics and promoting more flexible work arrangements, specifically for people on bereavement and parents. You know, this strengthens protections for pregnant women, new mothers, and ties to minimum wage, creates more of a tie between that and cost of living. And it creates a fair work agency, which they started to talk about in that soundbite, to oversee workers' rights enforcement. So if things aren't going so well, that you have a way to report this and actually have something done. Full implementation is expected by fall of 2026. Another story we were working on this week is about Ozempic. So this is the famous weight loss drug. Many of you probably know people that are taking Ozempic or one of the many other medications that are mirrored from Ozempic. Now, I learned a lot when doing this story. So the drug was initially created for type 2 diabetes. It's been around. I don't know if it was actually called Ozempic when it was just for type 2, diabetes patients, but it has been around for a while. It is spurring a lot of debate over how it's being used to treat obesity. Some people are seeing this as a breakthrough for significant weight loss because people are losing a massive amount of weight by taking this. And by the way, it is a shot. It's not a pill, it's a shot. And it does carry some health risks, though, including digestive issues, potential mental health impacts. But there's been a lot of marketing around this. A lot of celebrities have been endorsing this. Surprise, surprise. It's also extremely expensive. This is priced between $1,000 and $1,500 per month. So a lot of people can't afford that, right? And there are, yes, of course, some shadiness going around with lobbying and, how do we get this covered in certain ways so people can make more money, blah, 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 blah. So this drug is a little tricky. The people that I talked to said, it's great if you have a lot of weight to lose, but it's also not teaching people, if you've got 20, 30, 40 pounds to lose, it's not really teaching you how to keep that weight off.
I think what's confusing about Ozempic is it does have some amazing upsides. And so we can't just totally villainize it. It's like, oh, there's some interesting things to learn here. And people who are in a massive metabolic crisis, it can be a lifeline to get them out. But again, a line that I will continue to hold is lifestyle, lifestyle, lifestyle. There is no free pass when it comes to your health. I mean, we can hack in from many different directions. We have some pretty fast paths to health, like, learning how to metabolically switch. But in the end, you are going to have to make health your responsibility, and you're going to have to work for it, especially as you age.
I also did a story this week where I interviewed someone. Her name was Patty Wood. Her name is still Patty Wood. She didn't change it. She is an advocate with the Baby Safe Project. They highlight concerns about the effects of wireless radiation, specifically from your cell phone, and how that impacts pregnancy. How does that impact a fetus in their mother's uterus during pregnancy? The Baby Safe Project educates the public about potential health risks, especially for kids who are vulnerable to environmental exposures. Take a listen.
We came up with this Baby Safe Project, which was basically to just warn pregnant women about not exposing that developing baby, especially that developing baby's brain, to high amounts of cell phone radiation. And that actually comes because you are just typically putting your cell phone in your pocket, without even thinking. This is what you do. You talk on it and then you stick it in your pocket and walk away, right? And when you're talking about this type of radiation, radio frequency radiation or wireless radiation, proximity is everything.
It's so true. And in our conversation, Patty and I talked about some simple precautions people could take. She recommends that you text people over talking on your phone. You can also use something called an air tube headset. I had no idea what that was. We had a little conversation about that. So look that up. It's kind of an interesting device. And just keeping your phones away from the body, especially during sleep. Most of us sleep with our phone right next to our head. It's charging right next to us. Not the best thing, especially for pregnant women, but really for all of us, right? We know better. All right, UK homeowners. So they're going through some issues over spray foam insulation. This is complicating property sales, mortgages, and home equity access. So this is literally what it sounds like. They are insulating mainly like their attic spaces, and it's sprayed. It's like a spray foam. You spray it on, and it has a lot of benefits. It's easy to put on, but what they're finding is a lot of people that are putting this on aren't doing it right, and then it creates a whole plethora of issues, especially due to the UK's damp climate, right? Because there's a lot of moisture involved. So if you're not getting the spray foam put on properly, there's a whole lot of issues.
Spray foam. What is spray foam? Well, basically it's an insulation, but it's quite a new one and lenders aren't quite sure about it. So there are a lot of lenders who are saying, no, if your property has spray foam insulation in the rafters of your property, it's going to be really hard to get a valuer to say this is a good property to lend on. Basically, what they're worried about is condensation getting behind the spray foam and then rotting the roof or the rafters, which is quite a big problem when you think about it.
There's also environmental concerns about the production of it, the disposal of it. And many homeowners are now considering alternative insulations like fiberglass, that's been around forever, at least here in the US, mineral wool. Some of these are more reliable and climate appropriate. And experts advise consulting professionals, just make sure that you're putting it in okay if you decide to do something like that. Maybe just don't do that. Don't go the spray foam route at all. There's, like I said, there's other alternatives because you don't want to get to the point where you want to sell your home and you can't sell it, or you're even underwater with your home because, you owe more money than it's even worth. So you don't want to get yourself into that issue, which a lot of people in the UK apparently are in at this moment. All right, so California decided to sue ExxonMobil, which is a gas company, but it's all about plastic. And you may be wondering, what? Why are they suing them about plastic? Well, plastic is everywhere. We've been running a bunch of stories about plastic and how it's ending up in people's organs and stuff, places it should absolutely not be. It is used in packaging, in clothing, because it's very versatile and it's affordable. But the environmental toll is massive. So there are 280 million tons of plastic waste produced annually. And I believe this is just the U.S. 46% of that ends up in landfills and 22% ends up as litter. Now, you guys remember the old commercials where they made it seem like you have to recycle everything? Recycling is the solution to all of our environmental problems. Well, recent findings are revealing that only 5% of U.S. plastic is actually recycled. And it's not because you're not throwing it in the recycling bin. It's that the actual materials cannot be recycled together. So California has filed a lawsuit against ExxonMobil because they produce the plastic. Now, you don't think that, it's a gas company, right? But what they produce is used in making plastic. So it can be traced back. And this lawsuit seeks to hold ExxonMobil accountable, address pollution from a cleanup fund, and also ensure more honesty in recycling claims.
They lied to us about plastic recycling, and finally, they're getting sued for it. The case involves ExxonMobil, the same oil giant that's on the hook for covering up the impacts of the climate crisis for decades. Only this case is about the plastic which oil is made from. Exxon is the largest producer of resins used for single-use plastic. The case is being led by California's Attorney General, Rob Bonta, who accuses ExxonMobil of a decades-long campaign of deception. In marketing, they promoted plastic recycling as a solution when they knew it couldn't be. An investigation found that nearly all the plastic waste processed by Exxon has been turned into fuel. That is, it was burnt. Now, this shouldn't be too surprising if you know that only 9% of plastic produced globally is recycled. California says that Exxon's marketing violated multiple state laws on water pollution, false advertisement, unfair competition, natural resources, and my favorite one, being a state nuisance.
I love how they can sue for being a nuisance. Don't you wish we could do that? You're a nuisance. Now leave me alone. All right. So obviously the goal with this is to create a broader push to demand more corporate responsibility and improve plastic waste management. That is a huge issue. And yes, it absolutely has to be addressed. Now let's talk a little bit about letters of medical necessity, because this can be a powerful tool to manage health costs and to access essential treatments not covered by standard IRS guidelines. So let's talk about this a little bit more. This is something that is done in the U.S., and it explains why a treatment, device, or service is crucial for a patient's well-being, and it can help with reimbursements from HSA or FSA accounts. Now, what our story really focuses on is how these letters can also open doors for unconventional expenses, like gym memberships and alternative therapies. And these must be renewed regularly to maintain coverage. So there are platforms, like there's a company out there called TrueMed, you can look that up, that are trying to streamline the process, offering HSA and FSA eligible evaluations that basically make this whole process easier and more affordable. So look it up, letters of medical necessity, if you want to get healthier by going to a gym more, or maybe visiting your chiropractor or getting acupuncture. All these different things, maybe even a massage, who knows? But most people don't realize that these more non-conventional ways can actually be prescribed, if you will, for better health. Why does it just have to be about popping pills? There's so many other options out there, but most of us don't know about it. So again, look it up, letters of medical necessity. And our final news story that we were working on this week is about exposing the food pyramid. Do you guys remember this? This started off in the U.S., but what starts in the U.S. kind of goes everywhere. So if you're in other countries, odds are you had something similar. For decades, the USDA's food pyramid was a visual guide. It's literally a pyramid that was intended to help Americans make healthier choices. But it has also been a source of controversy. It was originally introduced in 1992, and it really emphasized high carbohydrates, placing fats at the top for minimal consumption, not distinguishing what type of fats or anything like that. There's a lot of flaws with this, and that's why our story is called Exposing the Food Pyramid, because we go through this. And it has gone through some revisions, so it's no longer the standard pyramid. They had a second pyramid they created where they had this little guy, it looked like he was walking up some steps. Now they're on to something called My Plate. So there definitely have been some modifications over the years, and we give you the whole history of it. The soundbite that I want to play for you is really interesting. So this guy is he was a lobbyist. Now he's on the other side. Now he's advocating for getting pharmaceutical companies out of the food industry, more exposure of what's actually in our food. And he was a lobbyist, though, and he gives you a little bit of insight on the lobbyist's role in pushing out this food pyramid. Take a listen.
I, as a lobbyist on the conservative side of the aisle 15 years ago around this town here, was saying any infringement on the food companies was an attack on the free market. That was BS. They have rigged the market. They paid millions of dollars to Harvard to produce studies in the 70s and 80s and 90s saying sugar doesn't cause obesity. They then used those studies with Harvard to go to the USDA and buy them off to do a processed food marketing document, the food pyramid. And, all of our parents in the 90s thought it was just totally fine to feed their kids ultra-processed food, right? And that was actually following government guidelines. This was a very deliberate strategy. At the same time, the medical organizations like the American Diabetes Association and the American Academy of Pediatrics were not calling this out. They were taking money from food companies. I mean, it is still just astounding to me that 90% of the American Diabetes Association funding comes from food companies and pharma companies.
Isn't that crazy? Oh my gosh, the lobbying that takes place in order to get some of this stuff. I mean, it's so incestuous, right? And it all boils down to power and money. And when something goes away because other laws have been created to be like, can't really do that. Or the food pyramid changes, right? And now that, like I said, they're onto this whole My Plate thing, which, you have to look it up. The visual on it is very interesting. So they're recommending different things, but it doesn't mean lobbying still doesn't happen on different levels. And we talk about that in the story as well. I think the most important thing is you have to be your own advocate. If you're a parent, you have to advocate for your kids. These flyers were distributed throughout all schools. We all thought we were doing the best thing for our kids by making them eat a ton of carbohydrates and not enough healthy fat. You remember that whole campaign about, it's fat, everything has to be fat-free this, fat-free that. We just didn't know. So we have to be asking these questions and advocating for ourselves and our loved ones. Okay, let's take a look at some of the highlights from the Global Intelligence Agency operational reports from this week. Kimberly Gogan does these reports, and I mentioned last week, so when I released last week's podcast episode, I said, hey, I got to record this one early because I was traveling over the weekend, and I said I couldn't get to Friday's report. It hadn't been released yet with Kim and the GIA, and I told you I would update you this week. But here's the thing. There was no report of Friday last week, so you actually didn't miss anything. But this week on Monday, Kim gives us an update of what was going on last week, why there was no report, because basically all hell broke loose. And the secret space program thought there were going to be 60 billion aliens that were going to come to their rescue. Take a listen.
The SSP, true to form, told everybody there was going to be a huge event that was going to take place this weekend. It was all over alt media. Not only was it all over alt media, but it was also circulating through intelligence agencies around the world, operatives, that there was going to be a big turn of events, possibly an alien invasion with 60 billion aliens that would invade this earth. And I'm sorry, I can't help but laugh at this one, that we were going to have an EBS or IBS or some kind of BS. We got a BS. We definitely, they got the BS right. As far as everything else, not quite so much. They did, however, make a valiant effort over the weekend to open up portals. Apparently, they thought that they could do this with dark energy and dark matter. And for those of you that dabble in quantum physics, you will know that you can now not open a portal with dark energy and dark matter or dark frequencies. You can't do it now. You couldn't do it a year ago. You couldn't even do it 5 years ago. You need something different. And unfortunately, that something different, that source energy, is not going to help you bring in your aliens that don't exist. They don't exist on Gaia, which is our actual planet. They don't exist in the hologram we know as Earth. They don't exist anywhere anymore. Perhaps they thought that there was going to be some kind of computer-generated Project Bluebeam that they could pull off. I'm not sure what they were doing. But just like everything else these cowboys do, it fails. Now we're on to November 5th. November 5th, the gateway is going to open. Well, I don't know what gateway is going to open, but it's certainly not going to be anything to their benefit.
Yeah, yawn. Oh my gosh. Okay, Saudi Arabia is no longer interested in joining BRICS. And according to Kim, that is the first brick to fall. Ba-dum-bum. So we've been hearing a lot about BRICS, right? And this country wants to join and that country wants to join. And this is all about currency because BRICS said they were going to come out with their own currency and that everyone that's a member can have access to this currency. Here's the thing to consider because they've been hyping up this currency thing a lot. They do not have a currency. What they have is a prototype because they do not have the ability. They no longer have access to Omega or any real quantum system that can help them launch this currency, even with the group of countries. We're not even talking about worldwide. We're just talking about the countries that say they want to be part of BRICS. It's still impossible to do. It is never going to happen. And it sounds like Saudi Arabia is tired of the lies. They're saying, oh, this currency could come like in a couple of months. Yeah, they're just feeding you a line. It's not going to happen. Never going to happen. The other thing that Kim talked about on Monday was that Israel, this is one of the big things, the reason this happened on Friday, when she didn't do a report, is that Israel retaliated against Iran for an apparent attack earlier in the month. All of a sudden, Israel's going to respond with this attack out of the blue. What's really going on here?
So on Friday night, around the time that I would normally record the Global Intelligence Agency report, I get a call from my boots on the ground in the Middle East, and they tell me that Israel all of a sudden decided to retaliate from an attack that came allegedly from also the SSP, as we discussed on a prior report. But the missiles were actually launched from Iran. The SSP operatives were American, and they were actually orchestrating this missile launch using some advanced technology that no longer exists. But they did launch them from Iran over to Israel. Now, all of a sudden, come Friday night, at the very last minute before I was about to do this report, Israel decided to announce they were going to retaliate. Not only were they going to attack Iran, they were also going to attack Iraq and also attack Syria and other parts of the Middle East. Now, this was a little strange, so I did some investigating on Friday night, and what I found was an American cowboy, let's call him Duck Dynasty operative, over there in the Middle East, actually giving the Israeli Defense Forces orders and instructions and inciting them, rather demanding that they retaliate with some pretty huge promises. And I'm like, why are they listening to this guy? And who is he? So I never really got to the bottom of who he was, although I was 100% sure he was an SSP operative. I was 100% sure he was an American. And I was 100% sure, well, 99.9% sure I was dealing with Duck Dynasty there. Well, the intel finally came in over the weekend after Israel did not get what they were promised from this American. It came in from a very angry Mossad agent. And this is from Israel, deep inside Israel. They said that, there's a group that we're reporting to right now. This was a quote. And of course, the answer was, well, we assume it was the Rothschild family. But we were wrong. In part, I guess you could say that they are, because these people are all in it together. They're probably sit together and have barbecues and do whatever Duck Dynasty people do in their off time. But he said, we do all of this for a group. And I was like, oh, okay. And then after that, it came who the group actually was. We do all of this for the Trump Organization. I said, what? You're kidding me. You're telling me that you are blowing up the Gaza Strip. You are retaliating against Iran. You are telling me you're doing this for the Trump Organization, who we all affectionately call Duck Dynasty, hence the American cowboy over there. That now that all made sense. Now I know who the American cowboy was, don't I? And he says once Trump gets into office, they will help Israel decimate the Middle East. End quote. Decimate the Middle East. So you're saying that Mr. Anti-War, blah, blah, whatever it is they tell us American people, or, during an election time, that they are going to decimate millions of people. Oh, okay. And you're doing this per the order of the operatives that run the Trump Organization. That is a 100% confirmed fact. Not just the information from the system. This actually came from someone inside Israel who was angry because come Saturday night, nothing happened.
Yeah, I'm guessing most people that are listening to this podcast probably are not going to head to the polls this coming week in the U.S. to vote in the presidential election. But good information to have for those of you who want to run out and vote for this person who claims he's all peace, obviously completely in love with Israel. That part's right. But peace? And you're going to go in there and decimate the Middle East? Are you kidding me, Trump operatives? This is absolutely insane. And it will not be successful. Absolutely not. So on Wednesday, Kim talked a little bit more about these Trump operatives because a lot of them have reached out to the Global Intelligence Agency because they were looking for a compromise. Remember, they are all broke. And I can only imagine for these Trump operatives, they have promised the sun, moon, and stars because at one point when the actual Trump was in office last time, there was some money that Kim made available because she thought Trump was going to do good with it, and he didn't, okay? And then the money was pulled back. So people think that Trump has access to this money, and that's why they're supporting him. But Kim has said time and time again, you try to put that orange person in office, which is not even the real Trump, you try to put him in office, nothing's going to change. Absolutely nothing's going to change. We are not going to work with dead people. That is not how the presidency works, period. Even if you look in the Constitution, they've got to be breathing. So let's at least start on the same page by having an actual president that is breathing. Okay, but they did reach out and they were looking for a compromise. They were saying things like, oh, let's get Trump into office. And then after the first 6 months, then we'll announce that he died of natural causes. This is what they do, guys. They tell you what they think you want to hear because they know we want to get the truth out to the public. So they will use stuff like this, but they have no plans to do that. No plans whatsoever. So when that date comes, there'll be something else. Oh, we can't now because of this. And this is what they do with each other over and over again. They just lie like a rug. So we're not going down that path, okay? We're not working with them. But since this is election week here in the U.S., we wanted to talk a little bit more about how voting actually takes place. This is a really important part of the news, guys, that if you were going to clip anything out and send it to someone else, send this clip because it's really important to understand this process. A lot of us think we head to the polls, and we've got to say, for most of my life, I was a very avid voter. I was very enthusiastic about voting. I would tell everyone, you got to get out there and vote. Why are you just sitting on your butt? Yes, it's just one vote. But if everyone thought that, then nothing would ever get done. That was my mentality for a very long time. I am on the other side of the conversation now because I know that they select these people. But if you really wanted to know the nuts and bolts of how this works, Kim explains it on Wednesday's report.
Let's talk about voting for a second. So we're days away from the selection here in the U.S., which everybody around the world kind of watches and waits to see what's happening, especially with all of the false promises that the Duck Dynasty group is putting out there. And what are they going to do? So voting in every country in the world is not what it's perceived to be, even in democratic nations. As we've talked about before, it's a selection, not an election. However, there was probably a little more than a decade ago a group of people that do vote. They talk amongst themselves who is going to be the talking head, and their selected operatives to participate on a higher level than they currently are now. That's pretty much the discussion that's had. There are also discussions on this level where they would discuss will it be someone from the Black Sun? Will it be someone from the Order of the Dragon? Which group gets to participate on that level? And of course, all the operatives are Black Sun or, come from that sector anyway. But as far as the talking head is concerned, and then it would be which group would get certain favors and that kind of thing, and benefit the most from transactions and deals. So if we look at the last time that there was actually a vote for a head of state, it was Obama's second term on this level, because by the time 2016 rolled around, there was no Marduk anymore, and the other players in the game really didn't have the keys to the political system to make that vote. Now, since that time, that was the last ratified American president, Obama. The next time there was a selection, it was the end of 2016. And you're familiar with that. It was Hillary versus Trump, and Trump ended up getting selected by their own self because no one answered the voting line at that time. And he was not ratified. He was never a ratified president, never a ratified head of state, and neither was Biden. And that is because no voting took place on this level. Now, as far as voting, and this is kind of how it really works. Now, all of you may or may not vote, meaning you go to a polling station and you submit your vote or mail it in or whatever it is you do. And you then watch the selections, and you think that as an average everyday citizen, probably not a lot of you watching this, and you believe that you have voted for a candidate, kind of like the Hunger Games, because we live in a quote unquote democracy. And if you live in a democracy wherever you're at, you're doing the same thing. And in reality, that's just for you. It's kind of like going to see, if you remember this here in the States anyway, we had something called the Rocky Horror Picture Show. And there, in this theater, it was a special kind of theater you would go to go see a Rocky Horror Picture Show. And there was a movie that would play in the background. And sometimes when you would go see this, depending on where you were in the country, in which theater, you would have actors that would play a part kind of in front of the screen. And if it was raining in the movie, you would see the actors getting rained on the stage and that kind of thing. So they sort of participate like they're characters in the movie that you're watching. Not only that, the audience gets to participate. So if it's snowing in the movie, it'll be snowing in the movie theater. If it's raining, it'll be raining on you. If they're throwing popcorn in the movie, then you'll be throwing popcorn in the theater. So it's kind of like interactive. And this is what voting is like. You're not actually in the movie. You're not actually a hired actor to be in the movie, but you kind of feel a sense of participation when you're watching the movie because, you voted, you did your part, you threw the popcorn, when it was time to throw the popcorn, and you kind of participated in the movie. Therefore, you feel vested, you giving your power away. You're giving your energy away. And a lot of people watch the selection night all night long. And that's hours and hours of energy attention and consciousness you're giving to your selected candidate, which then would go into a bank, for lack of a better term, not a like a Wells Fargo or a Bank of America, but it would go into a Lushing bank, and then this particular person would get credit for that and their group of operatives. Now, I'm not telling you what to do or what not to do. If you still feel you need to vote, then, go participate in that. However, these are the hard facts. Probably over a month, if not more, ahead of time, a meeting takes place, usually on a Saturday evening, which I have participated in one in my life, so I know this is a fact, where they choose who is going to stand up in front of the American people, and in this case, you could say as the quote-unquote leader of the not-so-free world. Once the decision was made as to who is going to be the next selected person, actor, to play the role, then the orders would go down through a special master political line. Similar to a diplomatic line, but not quite so much, and this is where the order would come down to the operatives to tell them who would be selected. Now, the selection process doesn't occur until about 5 days before the actual selection. And 5 days before, that information would be released through that line. And that would be the party that would get ratified. And then that party would get all the bells and whistles associated and their selected operatives associated with the selection. Now, I do know for a fact there are operatives that are manning that line right now and have been for about 24, 48 hours because they're unsure when the information is going to come in and they need to be there. Now, I have some bad news for those operatives. The only one with the keys to that line to give you that information is me. And again, the way I felt on Monday night, I'm going to select my dog to move into the White House. That would make me the first mom. I don't know what that would make me, but I know for sure I'm not going to be sending the information through to support either one of the two leading candidates at this moment.
It's really interesting when you dive deep and you learn how these selections are actually run. It reminds me more of how they apparently select the Pope, but I don't even think that that's really accurate. How this elite group of people get together and, whatever, when they make a decision, the smoke goes up the chimney or whatever heck thing happens in that horrible place called the Vatican. But it kind of reminds me more of that. It's like this elite group of people get to kind of cast their ballot, and forget about you and me. Our votes have never, ever counted. We are, simply watching actors, and then they select the actors, and it doesn't even matter which actor they select. Like, we are an equal party offender here at UNN, meaning we are not in favor of the Republicans. We are not in favor of the Democrats. And again, this is coming from someone who spent most of their life saying that they were a proud Republican until I realized it is all the same behind the scenes. And there are, or at least were, beings that would control all of it. Now, much of that hierarchy has been taken out. We don't have ETs controlling our planet anymore. Thank God. Okay, now we got to get through these other people, these, Kim refers to them as Duck Dynasty, right? These secret space program people and Trump operatives. We got to get through this. The Democratic Party is run by China. None of this is good. None of it. For those of you over the last week or so that have just felt off, Kim talks about a program that, thank goodness, she was able to find and take care of, completely remove, called Project Sandman. I gotta give these, aliens, ETs credit for how they name stuff, because it's actually quite creative. So Sandman, Mr. Sandman, there was a 50s song, I think. Sandman comes, puts sand in your eyes when you're sleeping at night. So You know, a lot of us were sleeping for a long period of time. For me, it was the majority of my life until I became awake and aware. So Project Sandman is about what happens when humanity starts to wake up and how do you put them back to sleep? Because this was something that was undetectable. It was frequency that went out, completely undetectable. So if you were feeling off this last week, humanity is waking up, guys. I know sometimes it's hard to see that with all the crap that's out there right now on mainstream and alternative, but humanity is waking up. And that's when a system like Sandman would kick in. It wasn't a being that was controlling it. It was a standing order that was put in place by an ET at some point to keep us asleep.
Let's talk about Project Sandman. You might have, if you follow the alternative media, there are people talking about Project Sandman's going to save the day for the Q people. And there's all these weird symbols coming out on the Q Twitter pages. And, you know, there's been a lot of mentions of Project Sandman. So I wanted to tell you what it actually is, because it is something that could have possibly affected you. Is Project Sandman a human-created project or program like you would hear about various CIA programs? The answer to the question is no. No, it is not a human-created program. It is a program that existed in Omega, and it was tied to a covenant with Anti-Source. And it had to do with the rate at which human beings were waking up. Meaning, the more awake and aware you were, the less of a hologram there was, the more connections you're all having directly to our creator, our source, the more you're starting to realize something is wrong. The more you're starting to realize maybe you have more powers than you think you did, and maybe you can manifest things, and maybe you can change the world and you can change your life, which is true to some degree. What Project Sandman does is then it kicks in via a standing order. Then it triggers some frequency machines that were located around Earth's core. And it was a silent frequency. So sometimes you'll hear, high-pitched noises in your ear or lower-pitched noises in your ear, and you know that there's some kind of frequency coming through from somewhere, be it your electronics or be it through, some program somewhere, and then all of a sudden you start to feel something, tired, sick, energy drained, whatever it actually is. And in this particular case, these frequencies were actually silent. There was no trigger. Some of our frequency machines didn't pick up on those frequencies. We were having a hard time finding where it was coming from because we were getting a lot of reports from people saying, I'm really tired. I feel depressed. I feel sad for no reason. I feel lost. I feel confused. I feel disconnected. I feel that there's no hope. And these are all things that Project Sandman would have been sending out frequency-wise, and you wouldn't have even been able to detect it. Even the most sensitive of people could not detect why they weren't feeling well, why their stomach was upset, why they felt like their head was swimming, or like you had brain fog, like you hadn't slept in days, sleep disturbances. And this had been going on for a few days, and I couldn't quite figure out where it was coming from, probably even over a week or so. Well, we found it earlier today, and hopefully within the next few hours, a lot of you that have been experiencing that, and this is as of about 3 o'clock Mountain Time, hopefully those of you that have been experiencing this will start to feel a little bit better.
Yeah, that was definitely me. Earlier when I said I was feeling all off this week, I literally said, I just want to crawl up and go back to bed. And I feel a little depressed. I don't know what's going on. I thought maybe I just needed sleep. Enter Sandman. Metallica knew what they were talking about, right? Okay, and then on Friday, Kim released another report for the GIA because at this point, it was November 1st, so we had gotten through Halloween. Halloween used to be a really big time when they did a lot of crazy rituals and weird ceremonies. Kim said this Halloween was actually much better. She usually gets attacked a lot on Halloween. That didn't really happen as much, but they did do some weird humming and hawing in their little crazy ceremonies, probably with black hoods around fire or something crazy like that. It's not going to do any good. Okay, we are now in a golden age. None of your shenanigans are going to work anymore, guys. Sorry, no dark beans are going to pop up. They can't even do that anymore. There's no portals. Just not going to happen. Yesterday was actually the end of Lionsgate as well. So when we think of Lionsgate, we think of 8/8. It's not just on that date, but it was extended this year. It used to be a very dark time on this planet. It is now switched over to Source, and a lot of great things happened for us, and it was extended this year. So Lionsgate actually just ended, I believe, at the end of October. And finally, Kim talks about the next layer of the debt call being initiated. And I believe she initiated this. So she talks about kicking your opponent when they're down, right? Because we're tired of the deep state. They just keep doing the same thing over and over again. So they're all down and out because none of their stuff is going their way. There's no alignments. There's 60 billion aliens didn't do anything. They didn't show up. They don't have any money, blah, 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 blah. And we've been talking about these debt calls. This debt call happens because anything that was created out of Omega has to go back to Source, okay? Because we are now in a light age. And so all of this money, all of these different resources that the deep state was using is now defunct. And when a debt call goes out, all of their stuff disappears. So the next layer of the debt call went out, and it wasn't so good for the deep state.
You know, you do kick your enemy when they're down. Had to happen. And what happened today is that we actually made it down to, say, the mints. The mints are the ones here in the States that issue the coinage. They issue coinage in many other countries as well as the currency printers such as De La Rue and others, and also bond issuers such as AB Corp and the governments that would issue bonds. And government bonds, government treasury notes, those isn't really the government. Those bonds are not really the government's anyway. Lots of old Fed notes and those types of things. So the clawback was real. Up until this morning, before the debt call, it appeared that the United States government had about 3 weeks of cash left, and then there was no place left to look. That's what they're saying anyway, and based on the numbers, that's what's happening. There are some severe threats to people they think actually have some cash and have produced cash for them within the last year. And some of those threats are going to, for example, the Kuwaiti royalty. I know that they've been threatened very heavily to continue to provide cash for the Secret Space Force. Also, the royal family in Bahrain has also been hit up for cash. I think Qatar is pretty well out. Saudi's out. China's beyond out. The European Union had a few weeks left as well as Russia. However, with the recent debt call that happened, by the end of the day, they went from a few weeks to a few days. What are they going to do? I don't know. Sounds like it's a you issue. And not really our issue at this moment in time.
So when Kim talks about this being a you issue, as if she's talking to the deep state, she's absolutely right. We've been talking about this on the news. Just because they go down, just because their corporations go down, just because the governments go down, which it needs to happen, it needs to fall. Humanity has to start over. And we can do this. If you look at what happened with the hurricanes that came through the U.S., and we've had a lot of devastation happen throughout the whole world, not just here in the U.S., but the amount of people that come together to support each other, to help each other, because the government wasn't doing anything when those hurricanes came through our country. And those poor people, and people bonded together and helped them and got them food and got in their own helicopters and took care of us. That's what's probably going to happen here. Because they are not budging. They want us to compromise. They want to have their fake actors up there, dead presidents. Not happening. So if they're not going to come to the table, we're doing this on our own. And I actually think that's what needs to happen. Is humanity going to be uncomfortable for a period of time? Yeah. But remember when I talked about stepping up and us being that soft place for people to land? That's why you're awake now. and I'm awake now. This is why I know it's difficult and it's frustrating, but we understand what's happening now because we're going to have to help the people when these other institutions start to fall away. And this is how we get to the new earth. We're literally starting over again. No fear, because we've got this. All right, that wraps up today's episode. For more information about United Network News, who we are, what we do, visit our website at unitednetwork.earth. If you become a member, that gives you on-demand access to all of the content we release, our complete news updates, New Earth interviews, which that's coming, more stuff on that, but you can see all the stuff we've already released, but we're going to release a whole new show just devoted to New Earth and where our planet is going. And of course, all the Global Intelligence Agency reports, the full reports, you'll get all that and all things restoration. Thanks for listening today, guys. This is The Rundown, and I'm Sunny Galt for United Network News, signing off.